time up. Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of room. Runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Amed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Hit pretty well. Deep left center field. It is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE Podcast. I'm your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel Kirby. And for the Guardians, we got a nice win last night at Fenway Park, certainly rebounded from game one of the series. And, ever since that the Guardians went on that winning 11 out of 14, went on that crazy tear, it's been sort of like a roller coaster, Mel, up and down. When we get hot, really hot, but when we're cold, we're not even moving. So with the trade deadline quickly approaching, sort of just wanted to hear what your thoughts were on, what kind of moves we could potentially make and who you personally would like to see join the team.
Yeah, so happy Hug Watch Week to those who celebrate. This is when all the hugs in the dugout gets overanalyzed. Is that player on the move? We had the whole Ian Happ, Wilson Contreras embracing the Chicago dugout at their last home game before the deadline. So it's just a matter of where those two end up. But yeah, for the Guardians front office, I'm guessing it's probably pretty tricky for them to get a read on this team. Just due to what you mentioned, it's just been a roller coaster kind of in the month of July. But I think their MO is going to kind of be the same as it always is, right? They're going to be opportunistic. I do think they're going to want to make a push this year. I don't see how you can't look at the Central and think you have a pretty good shot. I mean, even with our struggles, we're 2.5 back. We're 2.5 out of a wild card. You're right in the thick of it. And if you can tread that water through August, September is a cakewalk. So if you're within a couple games come September 1st, that division could be yours pretty easily. But we're already getting some Guardians rumors kind of floating in here. And again, they're going to seek guys who are under control, right? They're going to want to take a shot this year while also having those players available to help them when this contention window really opens next season. So I've seen Jeff Passan and a couple other pretty reputable outlets report that Zach Plesac could be in another uniform by the end of the week. And again, anybody who listens to this podcast knows I've been calling for that since before the lockout. I just think he's a guy you really want to sell high on. Yeah. And mostly he's been fine. Like, this is no, knock on Zach Plesac. I just think we have a lot of guys, him, Aaron Savali, and Cal Quantrill, who are all 4th, 5th starters, right? And they kind of go for these guys, these, low ceiling, high floor kind of guys, which is fine, but you need some firepower up in the top of that rotation. And I think that guy, a guy that I'm kind of targeting for that top end spot is Pablo Lopez from Miami. Yeah. I think we all saw the reports yesterday saying that basically everybody's up for discussion on the Marlins except for Sandy Alcantara, obviously. But he has an elite chase rate and whiff rate. We love guys like that. He's got a 4-seam changeup, cutter, and sinker. He occasionally mixes in a curveball. But I would just be fascinated to see what the pitching geniuses in this organization can do with this kid who already has pretty elite stuff. He's only 26 years old. He's not a free agent until 2025. On the season as a whole, he's 7-5 with a 3.03 ERA. He's got 118 strikeouts compared to only 35 walks. His ERA plus, which kind of takes into account, factors like the ballpark and things like that. 100 is league average. He's at 135. So he's about 35% higher than league average. But the Marlins need a center fielder. They've desperately been looking for a center fielder. We've heard him in talks for Brian Reynolds. But I could really see a deal centered around Will Brennan, right? He's a guy tearing up AAA right now. Mm-hmm. And there's just not at-bats for him in this outfield right now. You got Stephen Kwan, Oscar Gonzalez is on his way back, Nolan Jones, Miles Straw. all these guys you got to find at bats for in the outfield. And, it's a reason they've last night they started Will Benson at first base in Columbus for the first time ever. And I think that's the organization telling us, like, hey, we want to give Will Benson a shot in Cleveland, but it's not going to be in the outfield. There's no room. So if you could center a deal with the Marlins kind of centered around Will Brennan, maybe a Jose Tena, one of these middle infield guys, and then like a tier 2 pitcher, I think you could have yourself a deal there. And, you could put him right up in top of that rotation with Sticks and Shane Bieber.
Yeah.
I mean, we got some other ones, but what are your thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's just start off with Zach Plesac. I mean, you mentioned at the top of the podcast, this is something we've been speaking about for quite some time now, right? When, it would have to take a really, really, really dominant year from Zach Plesac to solidify himself within this pitching staff. And look, it's not like he's been having an atrocious year. He's had his times where he's been knocked around the park a little bit, but for the most part, it's really on our offense. I mean, there's a good 4, 5, 6 games on Zach's slate this year where we just only put up 2 runs, 3 runs max. And I mean, when he's giving up 1, 2, 3 runs, those aren't bad starts in the major leagues. I mean, that's a very good quality start. 6 innings, 2, 3 runs earned. Your team should be able to get you some wins. And
it's going to be a seller's market too.
Right. So with Zach's record being 2-7 this year, but having an ERA which is sub 4, I mean, it shows you that he can go out there and actually produce for you on the mound. But I mean, there are guys out there that I've been looking at, like Luis Castillo, and you were mentioning Pablo Lopez from Miami as well. It would be nice to get another arm within the starting rotation to join Sticks and Shane Bieber and Aaron Savali, right? Like it would be nice to have that 5th starter that you can be confident in going into each game, right? But there's another guy that's, potentially going to be finding the market here is Franmil Reyes. Like, what's the deal with this guy? He's been on the team now for a couple years. We've seen what he can do. When he's hot, he's really hot. He's just hitting balls, serving them into left, right, center field. And, we've seen other times where he doesn't even look like a major league hitter. He can't hit the off speed and fastballs are just swinging out of the zone. I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts were with Franmil and, is this his last week in a Cleveland Guardians uniform?
Yeah, like if you were to tell me that the Guardians would be 2 games over 500 with Jose struggling for almost 2 months now and Franmil providing absolutely nothing, there's no way I would have believed it. But I mean, he's had more than enough plate appearances this year where I kind of don't think it's an anomaly anymore. I'm not really sure he's shown you anything this season, just strictly this season, that gives you confidence that he'll turn it around. I know the organization was frustrated, when he showed up out of shape to spring training. They wanted him to play the outfield more. He showed up out of shape. We all know his strikeout rates, like, if not the highest, one of the highest in the entire league. He gets eaten up by the sliders and he knows it. And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing for him, is that he knows what the problem is and he just can't do anything about it. It's like he's lost. He's a black hole in the lineup. And I've just always kind of said, like, I've seen people on the timeline saying they need to send him to AAA to get it figured out. I think with him, that's not necessarily the case. We saw he can hit AAA pitching when he was on his rehab assignment. And that's what gave us all hope that he was going to come back from that injury and be impactful again. But there's a huge gap between AAA pitching and pitching in the major leagues. And he's just not there right now. And I've always said, I think the DH position is a lot more valuable when you can interchange a bunch of different guys there. And it just so happens the Guardians have a ton of guys who need at-bats.
Yeah.
I mean, think about when Oscar Gonzalez comes back next week. Where in the world are you going to give him at-bats? He's done nothing to warrant playing in AAA. And to be quite honest, AAA doesn't have any room either. George Valera is stuck at AA Akron simply because there's too many bodies at Columbus. And that's hurting his development. He has to get up to AAA and start hitting AAA pitching if we want him to have an impact at the major league level next season. And like I said, it's to the point where they're playing Will Benson, who's never played at first base. They're starting him there because they think that's a clearer path to the major leagues. So, obviously Franmil has almost no value right now. I think a team would more so be trading for his 2019 to 2021 production. But we also have to, instead of getting so caught up in what the return would be, I think we need to look at it as the real win from a Franmil trade would be all the guys who could get at bats in that spot
100%.
that can actually provide production. So I'm ready for it. I'm not going to be sad about it. He's the most disappointing part of this team this season. And, I think it might be beneficial for both sides to kind of get a fresh start here.
Right. And, I totally agree with all the points you just made on that Franmil Reyes situation. But there was a topic we discussed last week in our roundtable with Kevin and Brandon. And, one of the biggest positions that we thought needed to be filled after the All-Star break was getting another relief arm, right? Getting another arm out there in the bullpen. And it was a night like last night that kind of just got me thinking, like, that might not be our top priority anymore, right? I mean, with Karinchak throwing the way he has, I believe now he's up to 7 straight scoreless appearances, and he's really starting to find the zone with that off-speed pitch, which he was struggling with before. But, I mean, with the way he was pitching against the White Sox, with the outings that Karinchak has had against the Red Sox, and to combine that with Kirk McCarty last night, what was that? 4 scoreless innings, 1 hit baseball. I mean, if that guy can come and find some consistency, this bullpen doesn't need as much help as we might think. I mean, obviously Nick Sandlin, Sam Henches, they need to find the consistency again, but it seems to be that, these guys are going out there doing their job for the most part of late.
Yeah, of course, like if you're a contending team, I'll never say no to adding a reliever, but they're gonna be pricey. And I just think if Karinchak and Sandlin can emerge like they have been, I kind of think that's your acquisition right there. Obviously, I'd love a guy like David Bednar, David Robertson, or Joe Mantipoli from the Diamondbacks. But again, it just all depends where do you want to consolidate those prospects? What kind of deal do you want here? Because, the Cubs have David Robertson, right? And Jesse Rogers, the Chicago beat writer, a couple days ago mentioned the Guardians as, one of a few teams that are talking to the Cubs about Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ. Could there be a scenario where you kind of swap out Ian Happ for David Robertson? Because Contreras is a rental, and it's not surprising they're calling about catchers. We know how bad offensively the Guardians catchers have been. But Contreras being a rental would fit Bo's timeline. He's tearing up AAA. I think he could be ready to start 2023 in Cleveland, so the rental at catcher doesn't bother me. And I always thought Ian Happ could stabilize the bottom of the lineup. But again, the only issue is the outfield is more crowded than we thought it would be before the season. But, if they're calling about Wilson Contreras, I'd have to imagine they've called about Sean Murphy as well. Mm-hmm. We know that, they had some dealings with Oakland when, we allegedly came in second to get Matt Olson. He's under control until 2026. He's a name I've tossed around on here quite a bit, but that would overlap Bo's timeline. But just imagine this for a second. How cool would it be to have a catching duo of Bo Naylor and Sean Murphy? Whoever is not catching would be DHing. That's assuming you're able to dump Franmil off somehow. But for the next 3.5 or so years, we could have Bo Naylor and Sean Murphy. And, I know Austin Hedges is phenomenal defensively, but let's not forget Sean Murphy is playing Gold Glove caliber defense out in Oakland this season. And obviously he'd provide a ton more offensively than we're used to. Obviously the haul for Sean Murphy is going to be a lot larger than Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ. But I think I'd like to know if the Guardians have called to check in on Murphy too. And, we don't have many leaks from this organization, which kind of sucks. We don't really hear about things until right before they happen, but that's going to be interesting to see if they end up addressing that.
Listen, I would say best case scenario is somehow we can get a deal done with Oakland to get Sean Murphy on over to Cleveland. Just to mention, like you just said, having Bo Naylor and Sean Murphy being interchangeable at that catcher position as well as the DH over the next 3.5 years sounds incredible, but we'll have to see. Look, all this time that we've been talking about, like, specific, position players, we always think that they're going to find a way to Cleveland, and then it's always the complete opposite. But, that goes against, that doesn't go against having full faith in the front office here. I fully think that they're going to, make some moves that are very surprising, and it's going to pay off in the future. But I did see a notification today about Shane Bieber potentially being a pawn within a trade. And I was just, wondering what your thoughts were. I don't think we're going to move Shane Bieber. I would be very upset if we did. But are there any other Cleveland starters that could potentially be in danger of being traded other than Zach Plesac?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Shane Bieber is untouchable. I think that if a team called them, like the Yankees or something, and we're willing to drastically overpay, I'm sure they'd take the bait. But again, I feel like if you're going to trade one of these starters you have now, you got to add another one, because there's no internal help that's going to move the needle that's ready right now, right? You have Peyton Battenfield, Logan T. Allen at AAA, Xavier Curry, Curry and Battenfield, none of these guys are on the 40-man roster. So again, I think they brought up Kirk McCarty yesterday to keep those 40-man spots flexible before the trade deadline, to kind of have some of those spots where guys could be DFA'd. They're going to clear waivers if you make moves and you need to add some guys to the active roster. But I'm sure they'd listen to a phone call about just about any of them except for Tristan. Yeah. I'd say Tristan's probably pretty close to untouchable. I can't imagine Cal has too much value right now. I don't think he's really been a starter at the major league level long enough to have teams really want to buy high on him. Or buy low on him. So yeah, I did see that. And I agree. I don't really want to see them trade Bieber just yet. I think he's a guy that we kind of want to keep at the top of that rotation, just on a team that has so much inexperience. If they're going to stay in this pennant race, I'd like some stability at the top of that rotation. But I just checked the score. Milwaukee's blowing out Minnesota 10-4.
Yeah.
So
huge,
we could get within a game and a half tonight if we win, which would be outstanding. Speaking of Cal Quantrill.
Right. And on top of that note, the Tampa Bay Rays are struggling mightily at the moment. And they've lost 5 straight, and they're currently holding that third wild card.
They lost Zunino and Kiermaier for the year, I believe.
Yeah, they're having losses. They're having a rough stretch right now. Over the last couple of weeks, the Rays have performed like one of the worst teams in the majors. I mean, they're joining like the St. Louis Cardinals in that respect. And
I think the Orioles will fade.
Yeah, I mean, they will. They're
fun for now, but
they're playing Cleveland Cavaliers baseball. I'll just say it like that. A bunch of young guys who had no expectations going into the year, but they have a really good mesh and really good chemistry together. So
they got a good bullpen.
All the power to them. Yeah, they're playing really good ball, and their managers actually doing quite a good job of maneuvering all of those different pieces. But I did, want to ask. We've spoken about Contreras, we've spoken about Happ. You mentioned Matt Olson, but that was already done with before the start of the season. But are there any other wild card prospects that you can see at this, last minute trade deadline?
Who we'd acquire?
Yeah, somebody that we haven't exactly spoken about in too much length.
From the Marlins, you could think about adding a Garrett Cooper. He's a kind of a first baseman. He was an all-star. He's got some kind of nagging wrist injury, but I'd even be fine if they wanted to sweeten that deal up a little bit, include him in the deal, maybe send him a little more back in return. I think that would drastically help us. And, don't count out one of those Baltimore relievers either. You got Jorge Lopez, you got some guys down there who, obviously are flourishing for them. And I still wouldn't rule out like a Trey Mancini type acquisition. But again, with the Orioles playing as well as they are, I don't really see, it's a good possibility that, they might not move him. So I would look to that first base position though, if anything.
This would be the year though. If Baltimore wanted to move Trey Mancini, do it now because people are going to be buying high. But on the other end of things, how are you going to keep fans in the stands by making a move like that right now?
Well, you also don't want to be like the Kansas City Royals and hold on to Whit Merrifield. They held on to him for way too long. Now he's got zero value, and they're going to end up being stuck with him. And I also saw yesterday that the Tigers, which just blows my mind, they're dangling all their prospects that they just spent 15 years rebuilding to get them to the majors. But Tariq Skubal, if you can get him, go get him. I would even consider giving up Daniel Espino for Tariq Skubal.
I didn't even realize he was available.
You'd have him through like 2027 or something. Like he's under, and he's got ace type stuff.
Yeah, he's their ace.
Yeah, like if you can go get him, I know it's, within the division it might cost a little more, but like Detroit just continues to baffle me. How are you dangling all these guys that you just spent all this time rebuilding for? It's just crazy how poorly they're run, and I really feel for Detroit fans, but I'll gladly take him off their hands. So that's another wild card.
Yeah, it's just a really poorly run organization. If you think all the way back to the days where they were competitive in the early 2010s, dropping all that money for Prince Fielder, giving a 10-year contract to Miguel Cabrera for over $300 million, which at the time was just mind-blowing. But I mean, look, if they're going to hold them out there, let's just go snag them. I mean, Chris Antonetti's better at out-wizarding the other general manager 10 times out of 10. So, I mean, if they're willing to throw them out there, let's put the cards on the table and get something done. But now that we've gone over this very exciting trade deadline, wanted to recap the week that was. Last week, we had our Guardians Roundtable episode, which was really, really fun. Just nice to kick back, talk about the All-Star game, the All-Star break, potential trades. And if anybody hasn't checked it out yet, I highly recommend you go back in the archives and take a look at that one. But just to recap the week that was, we had a split series in Chicago, right? It started out really hot. It ended really not, right? So kind of wanted to hear your thoughts. We got two dominating wins in the first two games of the series, winning 8-2 on Friday, and then last Saturday winning 7-4. So, where did we fall off in that series? It looked as if we were headed for a sweep.
I love the way they came out in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
They jumped out to that early 4-0 lead. You felt like the offense was back. Cal was kind of all over the place, which honestly I expect at this point. He's been throwing sliders right down the middle, yanking balls. But Sandlin, Enyel De Los Santos, and Brian Shaw pitched scoreless innings in that one. Obviously, you mentioned we got the win 8-2. And then once again in game one on Saturday, Josh Naylor just continuing to own Liam Hendricks. Got the go-ahead single in the 9th after Eli Morgan blew the game again in the 7th. And I've been saying he's a bridge guy, but he's another guy we really want to watch moving forward because it really appears like the league is caught up to him. He can't just be lobbing 92 up there, and they're sitting on the changeup. He's throwing his changeup too much. So I think you need to kind of push him back to the 6th, 7th inning. But once again, game 2, I think that changed the momentum of that series.
Yeah.
Pilkington was fine. He did what a fill-in starter does, went 5 innings, gave up only 2 runs. But then in the 7th, just the grittiness of this offense to come back with just textbook baseball, right? Clement singled home Jimenez, Straw tripled home Clement, Kwan singled home Straw, Rosario tripled home Straw. Just like that, we took the lead 4-3, right? And then Brian Shaw, they bring him out for a 2nd inning in the 8th. And I wanted to rip my TV off of the wall, not just because he shouldn't be pitching high leverage innings, but because he struggled to get through the 7th. They were hitting up, the exit velos of the balls that the White Sox were hitting were over 100 miles an hour. He was not fooling them. And I feel like Tito slapped the offense in the face. Like, cool attempt at a comeback, but we're just going to go ahead and run Brian Shaw out there again. Tito is one of the best managers in baseball history, but he might be one of the worst header managers this season in all of baseball. It's like he has to have one game that he just punts for no reason. You had James Karinchak. You had guys that you could have went to in game 2. And that was just a gut punch to this young team because they fought their way back in that 7th inning when the national announcers, most people counted them out that don't know how this team plays. And then obviously, when it was Bieber versus Cease on Sunday, you just knew you needed to win that Saturday night game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and you hit it right on the head. It just seems that this year there have been multiple games where even the fans have different ideas as the manager, and it completely falls flat on Tito's end. Like, I don't understand what the reasoning was of running Shaw out there. I mean, look, he had a great performance last night in Boston, gave us a good
Low
50,
leverage.
yeah,
Low
50 some
leverage.
pitches at the start of the game. It was great. But like, even if in that sort of game you're going into the 8th inning, I'm cool with you throwing Sam Henches out there. It doesn't even have to be Clase, Karen, Check, Morgan, whoever takes that 8th inning. Just, you're better throwing somebody else out there to at least change the eye levels of these guys, right? Have it be a different pitcher so that they're expecting something different. And if it's the same outcome, then so be it. At least we tried something else. But you know what you're getting when you throw out Brian Shaw for 2 straight innings, especially in a high leverage situation like that. But on that Eli Morgan note that you were mentioning a little bit before, I saw it last night, and they were talking about it on the broadcast. I believe it was Andre Knott just reporting about Carl Willis. They were saying that he's become, just that 2-pitch pitcher. But what's happened is the league has cut the plate in half. They know where the ball is going to end up. They know where that fastball, where he's going to be using it in certain situations. And like you were saying, they're just sitting on that changeup. So they're really just trying to, have him use the other side of the plate, maybe work in possible changeup into his mix. But I mean, he got taken yard last night. I'm wondering how much longer of a leash they're going to give him.
Yeah, I really think they're inching more towards using Trevor Stephan in that 8th inning role. I think just because he's got the more high powered stuff to kind of pitch in front of Emmanuel Clase. It's easier with stuff like that to have long-term success, right? Because like you said, they're sitting change up, they're cutting the plate in half, and the league's just caught up to him, and we'll have to see what Eli can do to bounce back. But I think he has more value, and I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, as that bridge guy in the 6th, 7th inning. That was a problem for this team early in the year. If the starter went 5, we were having issues in the 6th, 7th inning, getting it to guys like Stephan and Emmanuel Clase. So if Eli can kind of step in there with less pressure and get it to those power arms in the back of the bullpen, I think he could have a lot more value in that role. But, obviously Sunday, Dylan Cease, MLB strikeout leader, shut us down. Shane Bieber wasn't really up for that challenge, and it was just disappointing to me. He had 15 days off and he was struggling to hit 90, 91. And that is a tad bit concerning. He got extra days off because he was planning his wedding over the All-Star break, which is fine. They got lives too. If they want to put him 3rd, 4th coming out of the break, it's whatever. It works itself out. But the fact he couldn't hit 90, 91 and they were just teeing off on him. I mean, he pitched 6 innings and gave up 8 runs. I mean, that just doesn't give your team a chance to win against Dylan Cease. So on to Boston it was.
Yeah, on to Boston it was. And, I don't know what was more frustrating, that Saturday night second head of the doubleheader, or Monday night's loss in Boston. I mean, we were talking about it at the top of the podcast with Zach Plesac. I mean, the guy gives up 2-3 runs. We ended up losing this game 3-1, but there was 18 men left on base. It's almost unheard of.
7, 8, 9 killed us.
What were we doing after getting these guys on base? It was almost pathetic at a certain point, because I was like, the game's within grasp. It's not even like this is like a 4-1, 5-1, 6-1 game where it's like, okay, maybe their heads were out of it.
And it was like unopportunistic too, because I think Miles Straw did have 2 hits in the 9-hole, just not at the right times. Yeah. And then I remember I tweeted about it Monday during the day, because I'm thinking about just how quirky Fenway Park is. I'm like, we got a rookie left fielder and right fielder, and even Miles Straw hasn't played a ton of games out in center with all those angles. And, I said, are we worried about Stephen Kwan and that Green Monster? He might get a little cocky thinking, oh, we got this at Progressive Field. Like, no, that Green Monster is a whole different animal. And sure enough, in the 6th inning, they pulled Zach Plesac and Trevor Stephan gave up that hard hit. And I'm just screaming at the TV, stop going for the ball. And Stephen, bless his poor little heart, he thinks he can catch every ball hit to him, which he normally does. But he backed right up into that monster and then fell down trying to race back to get that rebound. And that's the main thing about that monster. You may think you can catch it, but you need to back up and play it off that monster. And that's a huge home field advantage for the Red Sox. Like, Verdugo is a pro at playing balls off that monster at this point. And, you know, it happened to Quan a little bit last night too. He did the same thing on a ball, went all the way back to the wall, bounced over his head. And that's just something he's just going to learn from making those mistakes. It's not really something you can prepare for until you go through it and until you look ridiculous on TV going for it the way he did. So it sucks that cost us the game because he's been so good out in that field for us. I wouldn't
even put the game on that one little mistake, right? I mean, when you leave 18 on base, you have to score at least 2. Come on. Yeah. Like, I mean, and look, Rick Manning and Matt Underwood were talking about it basically the whole night about this wall and, you know, how it's going to react when a ball is hit against it. And, you know, we saw what happened with Quan, and it looked like last night he made some improvements, but it's still, you know, it's still a test in itself. And it sucks. He only has 4 games to really learn it. But I mean, on to the next. And I think the Guardians bounced back in a big way last night. You know, Brian Shaw was the opener, went 2 1/3, which is arguably one of his longest outings of the year, I believe. So, you know, bringing him back out for the third was a little bit of a stretch, but, you know, we had a 5-0 lead, might as well save the arms a little bit. And even, you know, Austin Hedges, Nolan Jones getting that home run power.
Nolan Jones legacy game.
Yeah. How nice has it been to see this guy come up and produce?
I mean, that's like I tweeted last night. I'm going to tell my kids that was the Nolan Jones legacy game right there. He hits that 3-run homer. Boston loads the bases right in the bottom of the third, and Bogaerts gets greedy. You could tell he's frustrated. He's trying to get his offense going, and Nolan didn't even really back up on it, right? Like he threw a little bit off balance, threw a 95-mile-an-hour laser to Austin Hedges at the plate to get Bogaerts to complete the double play. And honestly, I think that play changed the entire momentum of the game, because if Bogaerts scores there and the inning continues, there's no telling how many Boston may have scored there. That could have woke their whole offense up with an inning like that. And then for the offense to come right back and kind of back up Nolan Jones there, and just a broken bat ball up the middle, Naylor hit. Second baseman got greedy, wanted the double play instead of going to first. We scored 2 more. And by that point, it's 7-2 and changes the entire shape of your bullpen, because with a 5-run lead, you feel comfortable bringing Kirk McCarty in. And I mean, he had the game of his life too, got his first career win at Fenway Park. And like you said, he only allowed 2 base runners in the 4 innings that he pitched. And I mean, just think if the game would have been closer, they may not have brought him in and they would have burned through a lot more arms. And I mean, they don't have a day off until August 8th, I think. They still got to go another week and a half before they have a day off. So hell of a performance by that bullpen. And that might be the role for Brian Shaw. Do what Tampa Bay does, you know, start the game with an opener.
Yeah, why
not?
Low leverage. I mean, it seemed like he was in the zone, and especially for the guys that are on the other end of that, right? Boston's lineup. You know, you've seen this guy throughout your career. It's for usually 3 outs, 4 max, right? But, you know, when he's starting out the game and everybody's trying to get hot, it's hard to hit a relief pitcher, especially when they're only going out there. They know their job is only 2 innings. The score is 0-0. They're just going to let it fly. So I think Brian Shaw took his assignment last night very seriously, and he just went out there and did his job, right?
And Milwaukee walked off the Twins last night. So that, I mean, it was a great night.
But just real quick, Mel, don't move too fast with this Wilson Contreras trade, because Austin Hedges, I believe, is 7 for his last 18, and he's got a couple homers in there as well. I'm kidding, guys. All right. No, it's just nice to see Austin Hedges. And,
it is.
You know, he's
a
great dugout guy.
I'd love to see him twice a week.
Yeah. Fair enough. Mel's got her opinions on him, but no, we'll just move on into, you know, what the upcoming matchups for the Guardians here. So tonight we got Cal Quantrill on the mound facing Nathan Eovaldi. You know, he was the one that started that 28-5 blowout against the.
Let's hope he's got that in him again.
Right. And I think that was the Toronto Blue Jays that beat him up last Friday. So hopefully, you know, he comes out rattled. And tomorrow we got Tristan Sticks versus Cutter Crawford. So 2 games that are very easily winnable. Exactly. You know, I didn't even want to BS for you guys. I'm lying here. I have no idea who Cutter Crawford is. But good thing he's a pitcher because his first name's pretty cool. But after this Boston series, we're going to be heading down to Tampa for 3. Bieber's going to start it off on Friday night versus Jeffrey Springs. Moving on to Saturday, if Plesac is still a member of the Cleveland Guardians, he will be facing our old friend Corey Kluber. So that should be a lot of fun, watching Tito and the guys interact with him over there. And then Sunday, it's undecided yet who we're going to be throwing, but we're going to be facing their ace, Shane McClanahan. He was the All-Star Game starter. He's a Cy Young candidate.
Sucks we drew him.
Yeah. And we'll see. But looks like right now, guys, we have easily 3 wins in the horizon. I would say 3 in a row, right? I think we can go out and win Friday, Thursday, and tonight. And hopefully, just get the best of Corey Kluber, as hard as it will be to do so. And then we got Shane McClanahan. But after that, Guardians are returning home to take on the Diamondbacks for 3 starting on Monday. And then we got the Astros for 4 more. But the trade deadline's coming up, so that's what we're going to be focusing on. But, really wanted to thank everybody for joining in, listening to the podcast. I'm going to pass it off to Mel to take us here away.
Yeah, excited to see what this trade deadline brings. I agree with Max. We got a few wins ahead of us, so let's see what happens. Let's see what our roster looks like on Tuesday too. But thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Guardians.